I had mentioned in my first slideshow this idea that what we were doing as architectural photographers was to essentially tell the story of a building. I've taken 3 residential projects that I photographed recently, and I'm going to use them to illustrate some of the things that I try to accomplish when I'm photographing, when I have assignment to photograph a building. This is a house designed by George Washington Smith. He's an architect working in the Santa Barbara, Montecito area from the 1920s or thereabouts. It's a beautiful house with great grounds. And it was actually designed for the son of a very wealthy family who was handicapped and could only get around in a wheelchair. And this house is actually sort of a small house off to the side of the main house, but it consequently has primarily ramps to get around on. There are very few stairs anywhere. And it's modest in scale, but I think really nicely designed. This was sort of my opening shot, and shows a pretty clear exterior. You can see the mountains in the background and the lush grounds in the foreground. This is a slightly different angle, and these 2 images are kind of show something that's interesting to me. The first image that I showed has a fairly, although it has quite a bit of depth to it, we're looking at the building pretty much straight on, and it has a very kind of, at the same time of having depth, it also has a kind of 2-dimensional feel to it, which is interesting, but doesn't quite render things the way an angle does, like this. It's very much the same information, or very close to it, yet I think this has quite a different feel to it. And while both of these images would probably never be chosen by an editor, they both have their function. And when I have the time, I prefer, if I see alternates like this, I'll very often take both images. This is the entry to the house, and you can see there's a nice light coming in. We chose the time of day carefully to make sure that we would have that. The light coming in really helps animate the space. And it also meant that we would have backlighting on the foliage outside, which tends to make it softer and a little more pleasing. And I think it works nicely with the interior. This is one of the hallways in the house. And again, time of day was really important in allowing us to show the effect of the sun coming through the windows, animating the floor, giving us bounce up into the light hits the floor and bounces up into the space, which gives it kind of a warm glow, because the floor is red terracotta or oriental rugs. This is the living room, again taken pretty much straight on. We get to see a fair amount of the space. We have an understanding, I think, of how everything relates to each other, and it's supplemented by this angle, which is has a bit more of an intimate feel to it than that first image, which was more documentation of the space. Well, this is obviously documentation as well. It has, for me anyway, more of an emotional element to it, which I think is can be really effective. This is the library, and again, This is a room which has a really nice ceiling. Not all rooms have great ceilings, but this certainly does have one, so we wanted to make sure that when we were taking the picture that we included quite a bit of it. And it works really nicely, I think, with the rest of the architecture and the interior design. This is an alternate view. And as I've mentioned before, foreground elements, middle ground elements, and background, you can see part of the house. It's in sort of a C shape, and we can see another part of the house out the windows on the right, giving us background. This is the family room. Nice, interestingly vaulted ceilings. And again, foreground, middle ground, background. This is the dining room, which is also connected to the kitchen. And although we did introduce artificial light, we chose what we thought would be the best time of day as far as light outside was concerned. You can see some daylight coming in through the windows, which also helps animate the image. Is the master bedroom. And again, a wonderful ceiling, which we wanted to make sure we had plenty of. And there are foreground elements which also help frame the image, the curtains on the left, and the armoire, the edge of the armoire on the right. And we also get to see through into space beyond. There's actually a room in the back corner, with an open door there. And we also did a detail of the bed, again giving it a much more intimate feel than the initial image did, which was more descriptive of the space. This is another bedroom, one of the guest rooms. And here we decided to use the artificial lighting as well as the daylight that was coming in, which gives it a warmer, more intimate feel. And here's another hallway, and in this one we get to see a bit more of the vaulting in the ceiling. And the light never comes through directly. This faces, the windows face north, and so there's hardly any direct sunlight that ever comes through those windows. And then the grounds, which are pretty spectacular. And whenever possible, especially with landscapes, but with the interiors as well, if it's possible to show a way in where you could, a person could actually walk into the space, to me that makes for a much more intimate image, and therefore a more successful one. A fountain at the side of the house. Again, including as much of the landscape as we could, while maintaining an intimacy with the fountain and the house in the foreground. And this is the pool house at the back. And this is another project. This is a house in the San Fernando Valley in Sherman Oaks, and designed by John Reed, and interior design done by Marisa Solomon. This house was built for themselves. And we go from an exterior into views of the living room. Again, it's a house with commanding views, in this case of the valley. And again, using some artificial light, we're able to bring up the level of the light in the space to pretty much match the light outside. So we have detail in both places. And here's the reverse picture of the living room. This is a space just off of the living room. It's sort of an exterior or partially exterior second living room. At least that's how the architect and designer see this as functioning. And since they use this space primarily at night to entertain, the decision was made to photograph it at night as well. This is the office in the house. And a powder room.